The mafia boss showed up at her door with groceries. The single mom waitress thought he was a driver. The Docklight Diner's neon sign sputtered, casting a weak pink glow on the slick, rain-lashed pavement of Harbor City. For Hazel Quinn, the sign's flickering was the rhythm of her life, unreliable, weary, but stubbornly clinging on. It was 2 a.m. The last of the shipyard stragglers had paid up, leaving behind the smell of stale beer and wet wool. Hazel, at 27, felt closer to 50. She counted the crumpled bills in her apron pocket. Enough for milk for Milo, just barely. The heating bill tucked inside her worn wallet would have to wait, again. Milo, her 5-year-old son, was a warm, heavy weight against her chest, his breath fogging the collar of her thin jacket. She had picked him up from the neighbor's apartment, her nightly ritual of gratitude and guilt. The walk back to their building on Delancey Street was always the hardest part of the shift. The cold air from the harbor cut sharp, smelling of salt and diesel, and it seeped right through her shoes. Their building's lobby was a study in neglect. The linoleum was cracked, and the air hung thick with the smell of damp plaster. Tonight, the elevator, a rattling metal cage on its best days, was jammed. The outer door was stuck half open, refusing to budge. A sigh, heavy and sharp, escaped Hazel's lips. Of course, it was always something. She shifted Milo's weight, hooking her arm more securely under his legs, and headed for the stairwell. Apartment 3. B, 3 flights up. Her legs ached from 8 hours of walking on concrete, but the weight of her son was a familiar, comforting anchor. She climbed, her footsteps echoing in the silence, broken only by the steady drum of rain against the stairwell window. As she reached the 3rd-floor landing, fumbling for her keys, the sound of the elevator mechanism whined, a heavy groan of metal, then a metallic shriek. Hazel froze. It sounded wrong. Not just broken, but strained. She shoved the key into the lock, her heart suddenly pounding in time with the awful noise from the shaft. Then, a knock. It wasn't on her door. It was 3 doors down. But on this floor, at this hour, any sound was an intrusion. She heard a muffled voice, then silence. She finally got her own door open, slipping inside the cold darkness of her apartment. She laid Milo gently on the sofa, pulling the worn Afghan over him before he could stir. She was about to double bolt the lock when the knock came again. This time, it was on her door. 3B. Hazel's blood went cold. Nobody knocked on her door, not at nearly 3 a.m. She crept to the peephole, her breath held tight in her chest. Through the distorted glass, she saw a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered and soaked. His dark overcoat dripped onto the faded hallway runner. In each hand, he held a brown paper grocery bag. He was looking down, seemingly patient, as if delivering groceries at this hour was the most normal thing in the world. She opened the door a crack. The security chain pulled taut. "Can I help you?" The man looked up. His face was angular, his eyes dark and unreadable in the dim light. He wasn't one of the usual delivery kids. This man was older, maybe in his early 30s, with an air of absolute stillness that unnerved her. "Harbor Mart delivery," he said. His voice was low, smooth, with a gravelly edge that the rain couldn't account for. "I'm the replacement driver for apartment 3, B." Hazel frowned, her mind racing. She hadn't ordered groceries. "I think you have the wrong apartment." "Hazel Quinn." The use of her name slammed into her. "Who told you my name?" "It's on the order." He shifted the bag slightly. "The building manager, Mr. Henderson, called it in. Said your heat was out and the elevator was acting up. He asked for priority." Henderson, that almost made sense. The old super was grumpy, but occasionally showed flashes of pity. Maybe he'd seen her struggling with Milo. Still, this felt wrong. The groceries looked expensive. She could see the top of a fresh pineapple and a gallon of organic milk. I didn't pay for this," she said, her hand tightening on the door. "It's already been handled," the man said. He nodded toward the rattling chain. "Ma'am, these are heavy." She hesitated, then slowly unhooked the chain. The man didn't move, just waited. She opened the door wider. The scent of his cologne hit her, not the cheap spray of the diner patrons, but something subtle and expensive, smelling of sandalwood and something metallic, like the air before a lightning strike. He stepped just inside the threshold, not daring to go further. He watched the hallway as he moved, his eyes scanning the cracked ceiling, the flickering light fixture, the door to the stairwell. It wasn't the casual glance of a delivery driver, it was an assessment. He bent to place the bags on the small shoe rack by the door. As he straightened, he looked past her, toward the elevator landing. "You should tell Henderson to get a technician out tomorrow." "It's always broken," Hazel said dismissively. "It's not just broken," and the man said, his voice dropping. "There's an unusual friction whine in the cabling. Sounds like the primary tensioner is failing." Hazel stared at him. It was too specific. A driver wouldn't know that. "How do you know that?" He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I notice things." "Are you the driver?" A small voice piped up from the sofa. Milo was sitting up, rubbing his eyes, his hair sticking up in soft tufts. The man's entire demeanor shifted, the tension in his shoulders eased, and the hard lines of his face softened. A faint smile touched his lips. He looked at Milo, and his voice, when he spoke, was suddenly warm, stripped of its gravelly edge. "Tonight, I am," he said. He pulled a digital scanner from his pocket. "I just need a signature, ma'am." Hazel took the stylus, her hand unsteady. She signed her name, her eyes drawn to his wrist as his sleeve pulled back. Just above the bone, half hidden, was a tattoo of a black swallow in flight. The image sparked in her memory, sharp and violent. 2 weeks ago, a fight at the diner. A man in a suit had been cornered by 3 longshoremen. The man in the suit hadn't thrown a punch. He just watched as his silent companion dismantled all 3 men. When they'd left, one of them had sketched that exact swallow on a napkin and dropped it on the table. The owner of the diner had seen it and turned pale, comping their entire bill without a word. Her head snapped up. The man was watching her, his dark eyes knowing. He knew she'd seen it. He took the scanner back, his fingers brushing hers, a jolt like static, passed between them. "Have a good night, Miss Quinn," he said. He stepped back into the hall and pulled the door gently shut, leaving only the sound of the click. Hazel immediately threw the deadbolt, her heart hammered against her ribs. She stood frozen for a full minute, just listening. She moved to the peephole. He was gone. But the red light on the hallway security camera, the one that had been broken for 6 months, was flickering. A tiny, intermittent pulse. Wreck. Someone was watching the feed. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A missed call from an unknown number. She tapped it. The number was filed under an automated business lookup, AC Transport and Concierge, a company she had never heard of, had certainly never hired. She looked at the groceries on her shoe rack. Milk, eggs, fresh fruit, a new, sealed package for a child's nebulizer. How could he know Milo had asthma? Hazel backed away from the door, pulling the Afghan tighter around her own shoulders. The cold in the apartment suddenly felt different. It was no longer just about a broken heater. The ordinary, weary struggle of her life had just been breached. The rain lashing against the glass sounded less like a storm and more like a warning. The morning shift at the Docklight Diner was a different kind of storm. It was steam, hot grease, and the high-pitched clatter of plates. Hazel moved through it on autopilot, her body sore from the stair climb, her mind grainy with lack of sleep. The groceries from the night before were put away, the expensive organic milk strange and accusing in her meager refrigerator. The nebulizer sat on the counter, a silent testament to a visit she could not explain. At 9:15, the diner's rhythm broke. A convoy of 4 black SUVs, the kind that absorbed light rather than reflected it, pulled up outside. They didn't park in the designated spots. They simply stopped, occupying the curb, their tinted windows mirroring the gray Harbor City sky. The regulars, dock workers nursing hangovers. Old fishermen arguing over tide charts went quiet. Sal, the owner and cook, peeked through the blinds of the kitchen window, his face pale. "Saints preserve us," he muttered, wiping his hands on an already filthy apron. "The Marchese family. They're back on the east." The doors of the lead vehicle opened. 2 men in dark suits got out, scanning the street before one opened the rear door. The man who emerged was in his late 50s, with a severe, handsome face and thick salt and pepper hair brushed back from his temples. He wore a cashmere topcoat that probably cost more than Hazel's car. He didn't look like a gangster. He looked like a senator. He entered the diner, the bell above the door ringing a feeble welcome. He was followed by 2 guards, who remained standing by the entrance, hands clasped, eyes dead. "Table 4, Hazel," Sal hissed. "And smile?" Hazel grabbed a menu and her notepad, her heart a cold knot. Table 4 was the big booth by the window, the one usually reserved for the Port Authority inspectors. The man looked up as she approached. His eyes were a pale, assessing gray. "Coffee, black, and the financials," he said, tapping the copy of the Wall Street Journal he'd placed on the table. "Right away, sir." She was pouring the coffee, her hand miraculously steady, when the bell rang again. Hazel didn't look up until she heard Sal's sharp intake of breath from the kitchen. It was him, the driver. He wasn't wet and patient tonight. He was immaculate. His dark hair was styled, and he wore a dark gray suit that fit him with bespoke precision. He was the man from her doorway, but stripped of the rain and the grocery bags. He was someone else entirely. He was lethal. He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on table 4. He walked past the counter and slid into the booth opposite the older man. "You're late, Dario," the older man said, not looking up from his paper. "The Atlantic Corridor meeting ran long," the driver Dario replied. Hazel felt glued to the floor. Sal grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in. "That," he whispered, his voice trembling, "is Aldo Marchese, the new head of the syndicate. And that," he nodded at her driver, "is Dario Marchese, the son. He's not the heir, sweetheart. He's the boss." Hazel's blood turned to ice. The man who had held her son's nebulizer, the man with the swallow tattoo, was the boss. She forced her feet to move. She had to take his order. As she approached the table, Dario looked up. His eyes met hers. There was no flicker of recognition, no shared secret, just a cold, flat appraisal, and then the faintest narrowing of his eyes, as if confirming she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "And for you, sir?" she asked, her voice tight. "Coffee, black," Dario said. He watched her pour, his stillness more unnerving than the overt menace of his guards. As she placed the cup down, his voice dropped, meant only for her. "Has the elevator stopped squeaking?" A violent shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "I was there. I remember. I know where you live." She just nodded, unable to speak, and fled to the kitchen. Mandy, the other waitress, was buzzing by the register, holding a folded tabloid. "Can you believe this?" she whispered, shoving it at Hazel. The headline screamed "Harbor Wars." The article detailed a bloody dispute between the Rossi Combine and the Shoreline crew over shipping containers at the South Dock. The Marchese family shows up, and suddenly everyone's fighting for scraps. The cops are saying no comment. They're terrified. Hazel stared at the grainy photos of police tape. She felt Dario's eyes on her back, a physical weight. A moment later, a woman entered the diner. She was the polar opposite of the Marchese men, sharp, elegant in a crisp white blouse and pencil skirt. She carried a leather portfolio. She ignored the guards and walked directly to table 4, bending to speak quietly to Dario, not Aldo. "Sienna Vale?" Mandy breathed. "She's that corporate lawyer, the one who does all the charity fundraisers for the city. What's she doing with them?" Hazel watched them. Sienna Vale pointed to a document. Hazel caught snippets. Press release. Port Reconstruction Fund. Public-private partnership. It all sounded clean, bright, and utterly legitimate. It sounded like a lie. Dario nodded, and the lawyer left as quickly as she'd come. Hazel returned to the table with the check. Aldo was already gone. Having left a $100 bill for a $2 coffee, Dario remained, sipping his cup. As she reached for the check, he slid something across the vinyl tabletop. It was the Harbor Mart receipt from last night. Her jagged, nervous signature was clearly visible at the bottom. "Keep the change," he said. His eyes flicked up to hers, intense and cold. "Check the third-floor locks tomorrow. Get a deadbolt." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. He dropped a small, cream-colored business card onto the table beside the receipt. "AC Transport and Concierge," the name from her phone. He walked out, his guards falling in behind him like shadows. Hazel stood there, her hand hovering over the card. He had warned her, but a warning from Dario Marchese wasn't a kindness. It was a claim. It meant she was on his map. It meant she, and by extension Milo, were now pieces in a game she didn't even know how to play. She pocketed the card and the receipt, her shift ending in a fog of adrenaline. She promised herself she would get a new lock, keep her head down and stay away. She would forget the swallow tattoo and the smell of sandalwood and lightning. She hurried from the diner, pulling her collar tight against the wind, almost running toward Delancey Street. Across the road, hidden in the alleyway by the shipyard, a man in a nondescript sedan lowered his phone. He had 2 clear shots, one of Hazel rushing from the diner, her face pale and worried, the other of Dario Marchese getting into his SUV moments before. He typed a quick message and attached the photos. He sent it to a secure group chat labeled UCD North Unit. The new deadbolt was heavy in her coat pocket, a cold piece of steel that felt more like a shackle than a shield. Hazel had bought it at the hardware store, spending money she needed for the electric bill. Dario's warning. "Check the locks," echoed in her head, a command disguised as advice. She turned onto Delancey Street, the fog from the harbor rolling in, swallowing the streetlights one by one. Her apartment building loomed, a dark monolith, and someone was sitting on the front steps. It was a woman. She sat perfectly still in the damp chill, wearing a practical trench coat, her gaze fixed on the street. As Hazel approached, the woman stood. She wasn't tall, but she projected an aura of wiry, compressed energy. "Hazel Quinn." The woman's voice was flat. "All business." Hazel stopped, her hand tightening on her keys. "Who are you?" The woman didn't smile. She reached into her coat and produced a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gold badge. Special Agent Lena Harrow, Urban Crimes Directorate, UCD. UCD. Hazel had heard the name on local news reports, a federal task force. Her stomach hollowed out. "I'm not in trouble," Hazel said, the words sounding weak. "That depends on you." Agent Harrow held up a phone. The screen glowed, showing 2 photos, time-stamped from that morning. The first was Hazel, talking to Dario Marchese at table 4. The second was Dario, watching her as she took the receipt. The angle was from across the street, the photos from the man in the sedan. "We've been watching the Marchese syndicate for 6 months, Harrow said, her voice dropping. "We know Aldo is the face, but Dario is the engine. He's trying to legitimize their operation, moving their money through that new port reconstruction fund. We believe it's the largest money laundering operation on the East Coast." Hazel felt dizzy. This was too big. What does this have to do with me? I just served him coffee. "You did more than that. He brought you groceries last night at 3 in the morning, and he paid your check today with a warning. We want to know what he said." Hazel's silence was its own answer. "Look," Harrow said, her tone softening just a fraction. "I'm not trying to jam you up. You're a single mother. You work a tough job. You're the perfect blind spot. No one looks at the waitress." Harrow leaned closer. "We need you to keep serving him coffee. Just do your job, same as always, but you report to me what he says, who he meets, what you see. Don't ask questions. Just listen." "You want me to be a snitch?" Hazel's voice dripped with contempt. "For what? So you can get your bust and my face ends up on the news. What happens to my son then?" She shook her head, pushing past the agent toward the door. "No, I won't. I just want to be left alone." "Being left alone isn't an option anymore. Miss Quinn, you're already in." Hazel fumbled with her key. "Stay away from me. Stay away from Milo." "When you're ready," Harrow said to her back. Hazel turned. The agent was holding out a small, black device, no bigger than a cheap pager. "Turn it on. Channel 12. That's my direct, encrypted line. When he makes you choose a side, make sure it's the right one." Hazel stared at the device, then walked inside, letting the heavy door slam shut. Across town, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the glittering, skeletal cranes of the harbor, Dario Marchese sat at the head of a different table. The men here wore suits worth $10,000. This was the Atlantic Corridor Committee, a consortium of shipping magnates and city planners. "The new container contracts are clean, Dario," a senator was saying. "They are 100% legitimate. So why are my federal partners at the UCD sniffing around the invoices?" Dario stared out the window. "Because someone is feeding them garbage. Someone is sabotaging the manifests before they hit the port. The Rossi Combine isn't smart enough to do this. The shoreline crew is too clumsy." Sienna Vale, his lawyer, stood beside him, holding a tablet. "The problem isn't just external. Dario, I ran the trace on the data leak." She swiped the screen. "It originated from a network relay, Harborline Protective Service." Dario's jaw tightened. Harborline was a private security firm used by half the businesses on the waterfront, including the committee. "And," Sienna added, her voice low, "their primary relay for the entire Delancey district. It's in the basement of a small diner, the Docklight." Dario's expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. "Someone is playing both sides," he said. "A third hand, a ghost in the wires, hiding in plain sight." He was thinking of a waitress with tired eyes, serving coffee right on top of a digital nexus. He was thinking of a squeaking elevator cable. When Hazel got to her mailbox, there was a small, plain brown box inside, no shipping label. Her name was written in neat, block letters. She took it upstairs, her paranoia now a living thing. Inside, nestled in foam, was a sleek, brushed nickel smart lock, the kind with a keypad and a fingerprint scanner. Underneath it was a simple, folded note. The handwriting was clean, precise. "For Milo, don't open the door for anyone but Mom." The next day, the diner was chaos. It was just after the lunch rush when 3 men swaggered in. They weren't Marchese's men. These men were loud, sloppy, and smelled of cheap whiskey. They wore Rossi Combine colors. They shoved a regular out of a booth and sat down, putting their muddy boots on the table. "Hey, princess," one of them called to Hazel. "Bring us 3 steaks, bloody, and a bottle of your best bourbon." "We just sell by the glass," Hazel said, her notepad trembling. "Then start making trips," he sneered. Sal came out of the kitchen. "Listen, fellas, we don't want any trouble here." "Then you shouldn't be serving Marchese's crew, old man," the leader snapped. Sweeping a handful of ketchup bottles onto the floor, they shattered, spraying red. Hazel flinched. The diner went silent. The bell on the door chimed softly. Dario Marchese walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, just dark trousers and a black wool sweater that made him look more like a shadow than a man. He didn't look at the Rossi men. He looked at Sal. "Sal," Dario said, his voice calm and pleasant, cutting through the tension. "I have a crew of 20 men working a cold site down at Pier 4. They've been asking for your apple pie all week." Sal blinked. I think I have 5 pies left. Mr. Marchese." "I'll take all of them," Dario said. He pulled a thick roll of cash from his pocket and peeled off several $100 bills, dropping them on the counter. "And whatever coffee you can spare. It's a cold night." The leader of the Rossi thugs stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "We were here first, Marchese." Dario finally turned. He smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that didn't touch his eyes. And you ordered steak, but Sal is busy with my order now." He paused. "A very large order. It might take him all night." The thug stared, his bravado fading as he processed the quiet dismissal. He was being shut down, not with violence, but with commerce. In his world, that was a deeper insult. He looked at Dario, at the casual display of cash, at the absolute lack of fear. He looked at his 2 friends, who suddenly seemed very interested in the floor. He grunted, then shoved his way past Dario and out the door, his crew scrambling after him. Dario turned back to Sal. "The pies, please." Hazel left her shift an hour later, her nerves shredded. She walked fast, her new lock heavy in her bag. She made it 2 blocks before she heard the footsteps, steady, unhurried, keeping pace 24 feet behind her. She stopped under a flickering streetlight and spun around. Dario stopped, his hands in his pockets. He stood in the halo of the light, half in shadow, watching her. He hadn't been following her. He'd been escorting her. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "I want you to be safe." "Safe? You're the one who put me in danger. They're fighting over you and the feds. They were at my apartment." He absorbed this without surprise. "Harrow," he stated. "You're tearing this city apart and I'm just a waitress." She took a step toward him. "Who are you? Are you the man who brings groceries? Or are you the man who starts wars? Are you the driver? Or are you the boss?" Dario looked at her, the fog swirling around his feet. He took 1 step closer, just out of the light. "Depends on the night." The sound ripped Hazel from a shallow, cold sleep. It was not the rain, not the building groaning, not the squeal of the elevator she'd heard in her nightmares. It was a tight, wet, whistling sound. "Milo?" She was across the room in an instant. He was sitting up on the sofa, his small body rigid, his eyes wide with panic. He was pulling at the collar of his pajamas, fighting for air. "Okay, baby, okay." Hazel's mind went sharp, her exhaustion vanishing, replaced by cold adrenaline. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed his rescue inhaler from the counter. She shook it. A hollow plastic click, empty. "No, no, no." She shook it again, uselessly. Panic, hot and sharp, clawed at her throat. "Okay, Milo, listen to me. You're okay. Mommy's right here." She grabbed him, wrapping him in the Afghan, and ran to the hall, the elevator. She slammed the button. Knowing it was useless, the door was still jammed, the stairs, 3 flights down, 8 blocks to the pharmacy, and he couldn't breathe now. "Help!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Somebody help!" She heard footsteps, not in the hall, in the stairwell, heavy, measured, and climbing. She froze, pulling Milo tighter. It wasn't a neighbor. Dario Marchese appeared on the landing. He wasn't in a suit. He wore dark jeans and the same black wool sweater from the diner. And in his hands, he carried 2 paper grocery bags. His eyes met hers, took in the scene. He saw Milo's blue-tinged lips, heard the desperate, whistling gasp. He didn't ask a single question. "He's asthmatic," she choked out, tears of sheer terror and frustration blurring her vision. "The inhaler is empty. The elevator." "I know." He was already past her, pushing open her apartment door, which she'd left swinging wide. He set the bags on her kitchen counter. "Put him on the sofa. Sit him up straight." His voice was a blade, cutting through her panic. She did it. Dario reached into one of the bags. He didn't pull out milk. He pulled out a brand new, sealed box, a portable nebulizer. He pulled out a strip of sterile albuterol vials. "How?" "You needed one," he said simply, as if explaining the weather. His hands were moving, tearing open the plastic, assembling the mask and tube. He plugged the machine into the wall. The other one was a temporary fix. He knelt in front of Milo. The machine hissed to life, a soft white mist filling the mask. "I've got this. Hazel." "I can hold it," she said, her hands shaking so badly she could barely make a fist. "Let me—" His voice was iron, but his gaze on her son was impossibly gentle. "Hey, champ, we're going to play a game. You're a fighter pilot. This is your mask. Breathe the mist. Breathe deep." Milo, terrified, looked at his mother. Hazel nodded, wiping her own tears away. "It's okay, baby. Do what he says." Milo nodded, his small hands gripping the sofa cushion. Dario held the mask to his face. Hazel watched, her body trembling, her heart feeling like it was beating outside her chest. Dario was completely focused, his large frame coiled in front of her son. He watched Milo's chest, breathing with him, whispering, "Good. That's it, deep breath, with every rise and fall. His hand, the one holding the mask steady, was large and looked scarred at the knuckles, and Hazel saw it. A tremor. It was a fine, barely visible vibration in his wrist. It wasn't a shake from exertion. It was a deep, contained tremor, a current of tension running just beneath the skin. His eyes were locked on Milo, and in them, Hazel saw a darkness that had nothing to do with the night. He wasn't just helping. He was reliving something. This was a ghost. This was the memory of a night he had lost. The awful wheezing began to ease. The tight, desperate pulls for air softened. The whistle faded, replaced by the steady hiss of the machine and the sound of Milo's breathing, deep and wet, but clear. The blue tint faded from his lips. After 5 minutes, Milo's eyes grew heavy, his body going limp with exhaustion. He slumped against the cushions, asleep. Dario kept the mask on him for another minute before switching off the machine. The silence in the room was sudden and heavy. Hazel sank to the floor, her legs giving out. The adrenaline fled, leaving her a hollow, shaking wreck. "He's all right," Dario said quietly. He stood, his hand now perfectly still. "The Marchese Fund keeps a pediatric pulmonologist on retainer. I can have him here in 20 minutes. "No." The word was out of her, sharp and immediate. She pushed herself up. "No Marchese doctors. No fund, no." She couldn't say your world. "He saved my son," she whispered, her voice raw. "But I won't be in your debt. Not like that." She looked at the clock. It was almost 3. I need to get his prescription filled, and he needs milk for the morning." She looked at the door, then back at Milo. "The pharmacy on Arbor is open 24 hours, but I can't leave him." She looked at Dario, the boss, the killer, the man who had just held her son's life in his trembling hand. "Will you stay?" she asked, the words feeling foreign and insane. "Just 10 minutes. That's all. Just sit here, please, while I run." Dario looked at her, then at Milo. He seemed almost surprised by the request, this small, desperate piece of trust. He nodded once. "I'll stay." She grabbed her keys, her wallet, and ran. When she returned 15 minutes later, breathless, a plastic bag swinging from her hand, she stopped in the doorway. Milo was awake, sitting up. Dario was kneeling in front of him, just as before. He had his right arm crossed over his chest, his fist balled over his heart. "This is the night's protocol," Dario was saying, his voice a soft rumble. "You're the knight, your mom. She's the queen. Your job is to protect the queen." Milo, his cheeks flushed with color, his breathing easy, watched him with wide eyes. "How?" "You listen, you stay safe, and you never ever open this door for anyone but her. That's the protocol." Milo, in perfect sleepy imitation, crossed his own little arm over his chest. Knight's protocol. He then broke into a small, bright giggle, a sound that sliced directly through every wall Hazel had ever built. The sight of Dario Marchese, the most dangerous man in Harbor City, teaching her son a code of honor on her threadbare carpet, made her heart ache. It was a crack in the ice, sudden and deep. And she cleared her throat. Dario stood, the moment vanishing. Her phone, sitting on the counter, buzzed. She glanced at it. A new text. "Agent Harrow." "He is inside the apartment. This is a golden opportunity. Leave the phone on the counter. Activate the mic. We need probable cause. Hazel. Now." Her blood went cold. Betray him, the man who just sat on her floor, the man who knew the sound of an asthma attack, the man who called her son a knight. Dario was watching her face. He saw the shift, the fear, the conflict. He knew. He didn't look at her phone, and he looked away, toward the wall socket by the door, the one with the cracked plastic faceplate, the one directly beneath the dead hallway security camera. "That outlet," he said, his voice casual, conversational. "It's not safe. The wiring in this building is old, compromised. It could spark." He met her eyes. I'll have an electrician replace it tomorrow. Hazel stopped breathing. He knew she was being watched or listened to. He wasn't warning her about faulty wiring. He was warning her about Harrow. He was telling her where the bug was. He was choosing to protect her and Milo over protecting his own secrets from the feds. He walked to the door, pulling on a light jacket she hadn't even noticed he'd been carrying. He paused, his hand on the new smart lock. "I'm not a driver, Hazel," he said, his voice low. "You were right to ask." She just nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "But that first night," he continued, turning to face her, his gaze heavy and raw. "I needed to see this door. I needed to see it like a normal man. I just wanted to know what it felt like. To bring someone groceries." He unlocked the door and was gone. Hazel threw the deadbolt. She stood in the quiet of her apartment, listening to the hum of the new nebulizer. She looked at the sleeping boy, the bag of milk on her counter, and the empty space where the most dangerous man she'd ever met had just knelt. A question formed in the silence, heavy and terrifying. How could she ever separate the man who knew Knight's protocol from the boss, who was bringing a war to her door? The back room of the Docklight Diner was reserved, a rare event that set Sal on edge. The sign on the door read, "Private Function, the Blue Tide Club." Hazel knew it was a political front. Sal had told her to just pour coffee and stay blind. But Agent Harrow had intercepted her in the alley before her shift, her face grim. "The Blue Tide Club is meeting tonight. That's Dario Marchese's new lobby group. I'm going in to plant audio before they arrive. I need you to just act normal. Keep the coffee flowing." Hazel's hands were tight on her tray. "I'm not your agent. Harrow." "You are tonight," Harrow said, slipping back into the shadows. Dario arrived late, not through the front, but through the kitchen, catching Sal by surprise. He wasn't dressed like the boss. He wore a simple button-down shirt, his sleeves rolled up, looking like an overworked logistics manager. Sienna Vale was at his side, all sharp angles and legal briefs. "Sal," Dario said, his voice low, "the Port Fund meeting. We're just using the room." "Of course. Mr. Marchese," Sal stammered. "It's just Dario. Sal, I'm handling the logistics." Dario and Sienna entered the room where 3 city council members were already seated. They were there to prove the Port Reconstruction Fund was clean, an attempt to cool down the very UCD investigation that was listening in. Hazel moved through the room, a ghost in a blue uniform, pouring water. As she leaned over the cheap veneer table, she saw it. Tucked beneath the center brace with a piece of black putty was Harrow's tiny, professional-grade transmitter. She kept her expression flat, her movements smooth. But as she bent to retrieve a dropped napkin, her eyes caught something else. It was a second wire, a thin, gray, clumsy-looking cable. Unlike Harrow's high-tech device, it was taped along the baseboard, leading not toward the alley where Harrow was stationed, but toward the diner's back delivery door, the one that opened onto the pier. Her stomach tightened. Harrow was here, planting a bug, but someone else was here, too. Someone was bugging the UCD. A new man entered the room, his presence immediately sucking the air out of it. He was stocky, wore a heavy gold chain, and on his wrist was a large, gaudy watch with a bright blue face. Hazel's blood ran cold. She'd seen that watch before. It was a status symbol for the Rossi Combine's upper management. The Rossi man ignored Dario, who stiffened at the interruption. He walked directly to Hazel, blocking her path to the kitchen. "For the chairman," he grunted and shoved a plain white envelope into her apron pocket. It wasn't a request. Hazel's fingers closed around it. It wasn't thick with cash. It was thin, rigid. She hurried to the service station, her back to the room, pretending to refill the sugar caddies. Her hands were shaking. She slid her thumb under the flap. Inside was not money. It was a single black memory card. This was the trap. This was the third hand Dario had spoken of. The wharf ghost. This card wasn't meant for Marchese. It was meant to be found on Marchese. It had to be the list of gifts, the bribes to the UCD agents. If Harrow raided this room and found that card, She would believe Marchese was bribing her own agency. The entire case would be compromised, and both sides would burn. Hazel's mind raced. She thought of Milo. She thought of Dario's trembling hand as he held the nebulizer. She felt in her other apron pocket. Her fingers brushed against an old, expired Harbor Mart loyalty card she used for the discount. It was the same size, the same rigid plastic. She took a deep breath. She loaded her tray with fresh coffee cups. Turning back toward the table, she caught her foot on the leg of an empty chair. She stumbled. Not a small trip, but a dramatic, clattering fall. The tray hit the floor. Cups shattered. Coffee splashed, and the white envelope flew from her pocket, skidding across the linoleum. "Oh, I'm so sorry I'm so clumsy," she gasped, dropping to her knees amid the mess. Her hands moved in the chaos. In the second she was hidden by the overturned tray. She palmed the envelope with the memory card, shoving it deep into her sleeve. She grabbed the loyalty card from her other pocket and slid it into the now empty envelope on the floor. She gathered the soiled envelope, her face flush with fake embarrassment. "Oh, Mr. Chairman, I am so sorry. This is for you." She handed the doctored envelope to the politician, who took it with a look of annoyance. Dario had not moved. He had watched the entire performance. As Hazel stood, he was suddenly at her side, his hand closing around her elbow, ostensibly to steady her. His grip was like a steel vice. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. His voice was a bare whisper, audible only to her. "You just saved this entire room from a planted evidence trap." He pulled back, his dark eyes boring into hers. The grip on her elbow tightened. Just for a second, that was impressive. But be careful. The person who set that trap isn't on my side, and they are definitely not on yours. The meeting ended quickly after that. The Rossi man was gone. "They're escalating," Sienna said to Dario, packing her briefcase. "The wharf ghost is trying to frame us. We need to get ahead of the narrative." "We go public," Dario said, his voice hard. "No more back rooms." "Exactly," Sienna agreed. "A community day at Pier 17. We'll invite everyone, the press, the politicians, the public, especially ACN 14. We open the books, show them every dollar. We do it in the sunlight where ghosts can't hide." Hazel was clearing the last of the broken cups when Harrow slipped in, her face livid. "My audio cut out 10 minutes ago. What happened?" "I tripped," Hazel said, not meeting her eye. The real memory card felt like a burning coal in her pocket. "I dropped the tray. They're planning a community day at Pier 17. They're going to open the books." Harrow cursed. "A publicity stunt." "Maybe," Hazel said, finally looking up. "Or maybe it's the only place your wharf ghost will have to show his face. You want me to be your eyes, I'll be there. Right on the stage. But we have a new deal." "I don't make deals," Harrow snapped. "You do now," Hazel whispered, her voice fierce. "You pull every man you have off my street. You delete my address. You never, ever go near my son again. Milo is off the board. You agree, or I walk." Harrow stared at the waitress. Seeing the terrified mother replaced by someone cold and resolute? "Fine. You're my eyes. But you're on your own." The rain was a cold drizzle when Hazel finally left the diner. Clutching her coat, the street was dark. She heard the rumble of an engine, too low, too slow. A battered gray pickup truck, its lights off, crawled along the curb, pacing her. She crossed the street. The truck crossed. She stopped. It stopped. Her heart hammered. She turned and ran. The truck's engine roared. It accelerated, jumping the curb, cutting off her path to Delancey Street. She slammed back against a brick wall. Trapped. A black, silent shadow peeled out of the alleyway, Dario's SUV. It slammed to a stop, blocking the truck's driver's side door. Dario emerged from the passenger seat. He wasn't wearing a coat. The rain plastered his shirt to his shoulders. He walked, not with anger, but with a terrifying, absolute calm. He walked right to the driver's window. The man inside, his face pale with sudden recognition, hit the locks. Dario didn't shout. He didn't bang on the glass. He just spoke, his voice quiet but carrying. "Open the trunk?" The man shook his head, terrified. "Open the trunk!" Fumbling, the driver hit the latch. The trunk of the pickup popped open. Dario walked to the back of the truck. He looked inside. Hazel couldn't see what was in there, and she didn't want to. Dario looked in for a long moment, then turned his head to look at the driver. "You're using the wrong tools," Dario said, his voice slicing through the rain. "If you ever drive on this street again, if you ever so much as look at her again, I will fill this trunk with your tools." He closed the trunk softly. The driver of the pickup screamed, a sound of pure panic. He threw the truck into reverse, scraping the entire side of his vehicle against Dario's SUV, and fishtailed down the street, disappearing into the night. Dario just stood in the rain, watching him go. The storm had passed, leaving Harbor City bruised and dripping, the air smelling of ozone and wet pavement. Hazel stood outside Brick House 12. It was a massive pre-war warehouse on the abandoned end of the pier, all rust-colored brick and weeping mortar. This was where AC Transport and Concierge supposedly operated. She clutched the folded paper grocery bags in her hand. It was the only excuse she had. She was here to return the bags. She was here to thank him for saving Milo, again, from the man in the pickup truck. But mostly, she was here because she needed to see which man would be waiting inside the driver, or the boss. The warehouse was cavernous and cold. The main power grid on the wharf had been knocked out by the storm. The only illumination came from a string of yellow emergency lanterns, running off a generator, casting long, distorted shadows that climbed the mountains of shrouded pallets. The air smelled of damp concrete, old wood, and burlap. And rain. The sound of it, a heavy, relentless drumming on the vast tin roof, isolated the space, sealing it off from the rest of the city. He was at a simple metal desk in the center of the cavern, alone. No guards, no sienna veil. He was just staring at a single, illuminated laptop screen. He looked up when her footstep echoed on the concrete. He didn't seem surprised. "Hazel!" He stood, but he didn't move toward her. He wore the black sweater and dark jeans. He looked exhausted. "I came to return these," she said. Her voice sounded small in the huge space. She held up the paper bags. "And to say thank you for last night, the truck." Dario just nodded, his gaze fixed on her. The silence stretched, filled only by the roar of the rain on the roof. The distance between them was 30 feet of cold, dusty floor. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice flat. "This place isn't safe for you." "Nowhere is safe," she countered, taking a few steps closer. "You taught me that. You, then Harrow, then that man in the truck. You can't just appear and save my son and scare away monsters and then expect me to just go back to pouring coffee. Is that what you think I expect? I don't know what you expect. That's why I'm here." He watched her, his dark eyes shadowed in the dim, yellow light. He walked toward her, stopping just out of arm's reach. "If you want me to leave you alone, Hazel, I will. Right now." His voice was low, earnest. "I will walk away. I'll pull my men back. I'll be the boss, and you can be the waitress. I won't come back to your door." He took one more step. They were close now. "But if you're here for another reason, then give me 1 minute of truth. No feds, no families, no ghosts. Just us, 1 minute." Her heart was pounding, a desperate rhythm against the drumming rain. This was the precipice. She looked at the man who was a contradiction, a killer who knew Knight's protocol. She didn't run. She lowered her hand, letting the paper bags drop to the floor. "No promises," she whispered, her voice tight. "And no lies." "No lies, he agreed." "Why?" she asked, the question that burned in her. "The groceries, the nebulizer, the truck, why me?" He looked away for a second, toward the darkness where the roof beams disappeared. "I had a brother, Luca. He was younger. He had asthma. Bad." Dario's voice went rough, the gravel returning. One night, it was a bad one, my father. He was busy. The ambulance was slow. I was sitting right there. I held his hand, but the medicine wasn't enough. He looked back at her, his eyes raw. When I heard Milo, I couldn't just stand by, not again. The ghost she had seen in her apartment finally had a name. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words felt small. "And you?" he asked, his voice soft. "Milo's father." A short, bitter laugh escaped her. "There is no father. Just a boy I was stupid enough to love when I was 19. He promised me everything. The day I told him I was pregnant, he packed a bag and disappeared." She met Dario's gaze, her own honesty mirroring his. "It's just been us. Every bill, every fever, every night shift. I'm just tired." The admission hung in the air. Two solitudes, defined by loss and exhaustion, had finally touched. Dario lifted his hand. He didn't reach for her. He just held it out, palm up, in the cold air between them. It was an offering, a question. He waited. Hazel looked at his hand. The swallow tattoo was dark on his wrist. This hand had held her son's mask. It had terrified a man without touching him. It was a hand stained with his world. She made the choice. She lifted her own hand and slowly, her fingers trembling, she slid them against his. His skin was warm, calloused. She laced their fingers together. "Don't rush," she whispered. It was a plea. "I won't," he promised. He didn't pull her. He just held her hand, closing his grip gently. He took one step and she took one. His other hand came up, and he hesitated, as if afraid to touch her. Then, his fingers, shaking just slightly, brushed a strand of damp hair from her cheek. She could feel his breath, warm on her skin. "Are you okay?" he murmured, his eyes searching hers, asking for consent in the dim light. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. His gaze dropped to her mouth. He leaned in, and his lips brushed hers. It was cautious, hesitant, a feather-light question. She didn't pull back. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and her eyes closed. The second kiss was deeper. It wasn't the kiss of a boss, hungry and claiming. It was the kiss of a man starved for air. It was a kiss of relief. He tasted of the rain and the cold night air. His hand moved from her cheek to the back of her neck, his thumb stroking the skin just below her hairline, and she felt the rigid, terrified tension that lived in her shoulders finally, completely. Let go. Her entire spine warmed as he pulled her closer, his other arm wrapping around her waist, holding her steady. Her free hand came up, resting on the solid wall of his chest. She kissed him back, meeting his slow, deep exploration with her own. It was a silent conversation. It was the smell of the rain, the sandalwood, and impossibly, the faint, warm memory of the cocoa from her apartment. It was danger and safety, all in one. He guided her backward toward a long, wooden packing bench. He didn't break the kiss, but moved slowly, deliberately. He took off his heavy, dark wool overcoat, the one that smelled like him, and laid it over the rough, splintered wood, making a soft blanket. Every gesture was careful. He sat, gently pulling her down beside him, their hands still clasped. He broke the kiss, but only to look at her, his expression raw, his breath coming as unevenly as hers. Beep, beep, beep. The sound was sharp, electronic and brutally loud in the quiet. They sprang apart, startled. A small red light on the warehouse security panel by the door was flashing. The generator was resetting the main alarm. Reality, cold and immediate, slammed back into the room. The bubble burst. Hazel stood, her cheeks hot, smoothing her shirt. Dario ran a hand through his hair, his composure visibly returning, the lines of the boss settling back onto his face. A small, awkward smile touched his lips. "The alarm," he said. "I know." Hazel looked at him. She had allowed this. She had wanted this. But she knew the rules of her world. "Dario." Her voice was clear, steadier now. "This was today. This was the storm, But tomorrow the sun comes out and tomorrow is for Milo. It has to be. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. He seemed about to argue, to promise her something he couldn't keep. But he saw the boundaries she was drawing, and he respected it. "You're right," he said quietly. "Tomorrow is for Milo." He picked up his coat, not putting it on, just holding it. He walked her to the massive sliding door. "But tomorrow," he said, his hand on the metal, his voice low as he looked back at her, "I'm still bringing the milk." They left the warehouse separately. Hazel stepped out into the cold, damp air, her lips still warm, her hand tingling. She carried a new, fragile hope, and a worry so large it threatened to swallow her whole. Pier 17 was a carefully constructed lie. Banners snapped in the salt wind, bright blue and white, proclaiming Harbor City Community Day. A local band played a painfully upbeat pop song. The air smelled of hot dogs and spun sugar. But it was a battlefield. Hazel stood behind a flimsy table, a volunteer t-shirt over her clothes, a pitcher of lemonade in her hand. Her smile was a mask, the real memory card. The one from the Rossi man was a cold, hard square taped inside her left shoe. Across the quad, Agent Harrow, dressed in jeans and a baseball cap, pretended to sign up for the blood drive. The drive was sponsored by Harborline Protective Service Dario's company. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. On the main stage, Sienna Vale, immaculate in a cream-colored suit, tapped the microphone. The live trucks from ACN 14 were positioned, their cameras sweeping the crowd. And in the shadows, near a stack of speakers, Dario watched. He was a ghost in his own party, keeping to the edges, his eyes never leaving the crowd. Hazel scanned the VIP riser near the stage. She saw the mayor, 2 council members, and then him. He was laughing, shaking hands, a man of the people. City Commissioner Preston Hale, the man who controlled the city's port budget. As he turned to wave to the cameras, the sunlight flashed. On his wrist was a large, gaudy watch, its face a brilliant, unmistakable blue. The Rossi watch? Hazel's breath hitched. It wasn't just a gangster. It wasn't just a dirty cop. The third hand, the wharf ghost, was the man holding the city's purse strings. A small tug on her shirt. "Mommy, can I have a balloon?" Milo stood beside her, his hand held by Sal's wife, Maria, who had offered to watch him. Before Hazel could answer, Preston Hale was there. He had crossed the lawn, his politician's smile cutting through the air. "Well, hello there," he crooned, kneeling. He didn't look at Hazel. He looked at Milo. "What a fine young man. He has your eyes." Hale looked up at Hazel, his gaze flat and cold. "It's so important to keep our children safe from all the instability around the port." It was not a pleasantry. It was a threat, delivered with a smile for the cameras. Hazel's heart hammered, but her voice was ice. She looked past Hale and flagged down a uniformed Harborline guard, one of Dario's men. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear. "Can you please escort my son to the supervised kids zone? It's too crowded for him here." She knelt and kissed Milo's forehead. "Knight's protocol, baby. Go have fun." Milo nodded seriously and took the guard's hand. Hazel stood, her gaze locking with Hale's. She had just taken her queen off the board. His smile tightened. "On stage," Sienna Vale began. "Welcome, Harbor City. We're here today to talk about the future, and the future is built on trust. That is why the Marchese Port Reconstruction Fund is proud to announce its Total Transparency Initiative." The giant LED screen behind her lit up. "As of this moment," Sienna declared, "our complete unedited ledger is live. There is the web address. We invite the press, the UCD, and every citizen to check our work. We have nothing to hide." A wave of murmurs and the rapid clicking of cameras swept the pier. This was the signal. Hazel moved, picking up a tray. She walked toward the edge of the crowd, where Harrow was waiting. She tripped on an audio cable, stumbling hard into the agent. "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am," she gasped. In the second of collision, her hand slipped into Harrow's jacket pocket. She left the memory card. "It's the real one," she whispered, "from the diner." Harrow's face was grim. She palmed the card and moved behind the ACN-14 van. She plugged the card into a handheld reader. Hazel watched her. She saw the agent's posture go rigid. She saw Harrow's face drain of color, replaced by a swift, volcanic rage. Harrow looked up, her eyes wide with shock. She saw the payment logs. She saw the offshore account codes, and she recognized one. Her own deputy. The mole wasn't just working with Hale. He was Hale's inside man. Harrow's head snapped up. Her gaze bypassed Dario completely and locked onto Preston Hale. Hale, ever the politician, saw the look. He knew the trap had failed and was now snapping shut on him. He gave a subtle nod to an aide, who immediately sprinted to the lead ACN-14 reporter. The reporter, Rhonda, touched her earpiece. "One moment, Miss Vale. We are just receiving a breaking update. This regards the credibility of this entire event." The giant screen flickered, the ledger vanishing. It was replaced by a grainy, long-lens photograph. Brick House 12, the rain-streaked window, and inside Dario and Hazel, the kiss. A collective gasp sucked the air from the pier. "Miss Vale," the reporter called out, her voice sharp with predatory excitement. "We've received this image, taken just last night, showing Dario Marchese in a compromising and intimate meeting with this woman." The camera panned, finding Hazel, freezing her in the spotlight. "Commissioner Hale, you look concerned." Hale stepped to a backup microphone, his face a mask of profound, false gravity. "I'm deeply concerned. Rhonda, I'm shocked. We're being asked to trust a ledger from a man who is clearly intimidating and influencing a key civilian associate. How can we trust any of this? This woman's testimony is worthless. This entire event, it's a farce." The crowd erupted. Shouts of shame and mob boss filled the air. And then Dario Marchese walked out of the shadows. He walked onto the stage, his steps measured, and took the microphone from a stunned Sienna. He was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. "The photo is real," he said. The crowd went dead silent. "I did meet with Miss Quinn. It was a mistake. It was off protocol," he said, owning the hit completely. "I was concerned for her safety. She was being harassed by competitors, and I acted." He paused, letting the admission land. "But Commissioner Hale is right about one thing. You should not have to trust me. You shouldn't have to trust my ledger." He turned his gaze on Hale, "which is why I am formally inviting the Interstate Integrity Commission to conduct a full, independent federal audit of every single contract associated with the port, the Marchese Fund, and the commissioner's budget." Hale's face turned a mottled shade of red. Dario had just leapfrogged him, going to a higher, untouchable authority. The reporter, Rhonda, scrambled, shoving her microphone into Hazel's face. "Miss Quinn, are you his mistress? Were you coerced? What did he promise you?" Hazel looked at the camera, at the thousands of watching faces. She saw Dario on the stage, waiting. She saw Harrow by the van, her face thunderous. She saw Hale, his smirk fading. She thought of Milo. She took the microphone from the reporter's hand. Her own hand was perfectly steady. "My name is Hazel Quinn," she said. Her voice, amplified, was clear and strong. It did not tremble. "I am not a mistress. I am not a witness. I am a mother." She stared directly into the camera, into the homes of everyone watching. "I am not on Mr. Marchese's side. I am not on the UCD's side. I will not sell my son, or my silence, to any side." Her voice rose, raw and true. "I just want the truth. I am a mother trying to protect her son, and I am tired of being afraid." She handed the microphone back. For a heartbeat, the pier was silent, caught in the gravity of her words. Then, a single dock worker near the front began to clap. A woman beside him joined in. Within seconds, the pier erupted in applause, a sound that rolled over the politicians, over the press, and over the boss, who stood on the stage, watching her. The Docklight Diner was closed, the neon sign was dark, and the chairs were stacked on the tables. but in the steel-lined kitchen, under the buzzing hum of the walk-in freezer, the War Council had convened. It was an impossible alliance. Hazel, her waitress uniform traded for a simple dark sweater, sat on a stack of flour bags. Across from her, leaning against the steel prep counter, was Agent Lena Harrow, her laptop open, glowing in the dim light, and standing between them, her arms crossed, was Sienna Vale, the waitress, the Fed, and the lawyer. The community day was a tactical draw, Sienna said, her voice sharp. Dario called Hale's bluff with the Interstate Integrity Commission. Hale responded by painting Hazel as a coerced mistress. Now, it's a he said. She said the IAC will move slowly. We need to force their hand. We need to prove Hale is the wharf ghost, not just that he's corrupt. And we need to do it without UCD resources, Harrow added, her voice laced with acid. My deputy is gone, and half my unit is under internal review thanks to that memory card. Hale has contaminated my entire agency. We are on our own. Not entirely, Sienna said. Dario has authorized the bait. He's initiating a transfer right now from an audited Marchese account, a legitimate $100,000 donation to the Dock Workers Pension Fund. It's clean, public, and loud. Harrow pointed to her screen, and it's digitally watermarked. The transfer is tagged with a unique cryptographic signature. If any entity tries to intercept, freeze, or even query that transaction, its signature will ping my receiver, and I will get the source IP. Hale won't be able to resist. He'll have to try and block it to make Dario look guilty. So what's my role? Hazel asked, her voice quiet. You're the performance, Harrow said. This can't look like a digital trap. It has to look like a normal night. You'll be here, closing up. Dario will arrive in 10 minutes to escort you home. Hale is obsessed with your connection. He'll have his surveillance focused on the two of you, watching for a payoff, a threat, anything. He needs to be looking at the street, not at his data logs. Hazel nodded, her stomach a cold knot. She walked back into the dark diner. Picking up a rag, she moved to the front window, wiping down the glass, her movements slow and practiced. The streetlights hit the fogged-up glass, turning it into a perfect distorted mirror of the street outside. She saw them, a dark gray sedan parked across the street, 2 men inside, Hale's men. They were watching the diner. A black SUV, sleek and silent, pulled up to the curb, Dario. And he got out, hands in his pockets, and stood by the door, a solitary figure under the broken streetlight. The bait was in position. Hazel continued to wipe the glass, her eyes not on Dario, but on the reflection. In the distorted glass, she saw the passenger in the gray sedan lift a phone to his ear, reporting in. Back in the kitchen, Harrow's posture went rigid. We have a bite. Sienna and Hazel crowded around the small screen. He's in, Harrow whispered. He's pinging the bank, trying to flag the transaction. A stream of code scrolled past. He's fast. He's routing the query. Damn it, it's a proxy. Wait. Harrow's fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the jump, the IP address resolved. Harrow's blood ran cold. Saints, she breathed. It's not just a proxy. He's routing his attack from a secure server, inside the Atlantic Corridor Task Force. Sienna's sharp intake of breath was the only sound. The Federal Economic Oversight Committee. He's not just influencing the task force. He is the task force. He's using the government's own secure network to conduct his crimes. Sienna Vale was already opening her own laptop. She didn't hesitate. The game just changed. Hale isn't just a dirty commissioner. He's a federal-level threat. Her fingers typed with blinding speed. I'm drafting an emergency brief for the IIC, not for an audit, for an immediate mandatory injunction and asset seizure of the task force itself. We just caught the ghost. We got him, Harrow said, saving the log. We finally got him. Hazel felt a dizzying wave of relief. It was over. Her phone, resting on the counter, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She picked it up, expecting... She didn't know what. It wasn't words. It was a picture. The relief vanished, replaced by a cold, suffocating terror. It was Milo. He He was on the playground at his preschool, his small body frozen mid-climb on the jungle gym. He was laughing. The photo was taken from a distance, through a chain-link fence. A second text came through. The public hearing is tomorrow. You will not be there. Your motherly speech was touching, but you will stay home. You will be sick. You will forget everything. Or the next photo will be the last one. The diner tilted. The sound of the freezer disappeared. Hazel's knees buckled. He wasn't just a ghost. He was a monster. She didn't cry. Her fear instantly calcified into a rage so pure it was almost silent. She grabbed her bag, digging past her wallet, past her keys. She pulled out the small, black UCD-issued pager Harrow had given her. She turned it on. She switched it to channel 12. Harrow and Sienna were still huddled over their laptops, planning the legal endgame. They didn't see her. Hazel pressed the transmit button. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the voice of a mother. It was the voice of a woman with nothing left to lose. Do it. In the kitchen, Harrow's head snapped up. She recognized the signal. She was already on her encrypted earpiece. Code Echo. Civilian witness compromised. Activate protocols. Target is the child. Milo Quinn, 5 years old. Move him. Now. Hazel stumbled into the kitchen, her face pale. Where? Old City Hall. Subterranean safe room, Harrow said, her voice all business. Sal's wife, Maria, is already en route. She thinks she's picking him up for a surprise sleepover. They'll be secure in 10 minutes. Hale's men are watching you. They won't even know he's gone. The diner's front door swung open, the bell chiming violently. Dario stood there. He took in the scene in one glance, Sienna at her laptop, Harrow on her comm, and Hazel, pale and vibrating with terror. What happened? He has Milo, Hazel whispered, the words tearing from her throat. A terrible transformation occurred. The composed boss, the gentle driver, vanished. What remained was something dark and primal. His eyes went flat. I'll handle it. He turned, pulling his phone, his thumb already dialing. I'll have my men at that school in 3 minutes. I'll tear his operation apart. No! Hazel lunged, grabbing his arm. His muscles were rock hard, tensed for violence. No guns, no war. That's what he wants. That's his way. He threatened your son, Hazel. Dario's voice was a low growl. That's not a legal problem. That's a me problem. It's our problem, she countered, her grip tightening. And we are doing it this way. She nodded toward Harrow. They're moving him. The plan is working. The net is closing. We can't blow it up with a street war. You're trusting her the UCD, he spat, looking at Harrow with contempt. I'm trusting the plan, Hazel said, her gaze locked on his. She was pleading, but her voice was firm. We don't save the world alone. Dario, you set the bait. Now let the trap close. You protect the front door. You be the shadow. Let them handle the rest. Dario stared at her, the violence coiling in his shoulders, begging for release. He looked at her fierce, terrified. Resolute face. He saw a partner, not a liability. Slowly, agonizingly, he lowered his phone. He gave a single, sharp nod. He stepped back toward the front window, his gaze sweeping the street, the rooftops. I'll stay out of Harrow's frame, he said, his voice cold and final. But I am not leaving this doorway. The Harbor Theater was not a courtroom. It was a cathedral of public opinion. Its velvet seats, usually reserved for opera, were filled with the salt-chafed, weary faces of Harbor City's dock workers. The air was thick with anticipation, smelling of wet wool and old dust. On the stage, under the hot, white glare of the ACN 14 broadcast lights, the 3 chairmen of the Interstate Integrity Commission sat like high judges. Hazel walked to the witness podium. She had been escorted from the safe room, her only request being that she wear her own clothes. She was not a witness. She was, as the chairman announced her, Hazel Quinn, civilian observer. She adjusted the microphone. Her voice, when she spoke, did not tremble. It was the clear, certain voice of a mother stating facts. I work at the Docklight Diner, she began. She recounted the night of the Blue Tide Club meeting. She described the man with the bright blue watch. The man she now knew was aligned with the Rossi Combine. She described the envelope he forced on her and the fear she felt. "You allege this envelope contained a bribe?" a commissioner asked. "I don't allege anything, sir," Hazel said, her gaze steady. "I'm just telling you what I saw. I saw a man from one crew give an envelope to a politician, just before he tried to frame Mr. Marchese." Sienna Vale was called next. She was a blade of pure logic. She presented the digital chain of custody for the watermark transaction. Commissioner Hale didn't just observe the transfer, Sienna stated. He actively used a secure server within the Atlantic Corridor Task Force to try and intercept it. Here is the log. The massive screen above the stage filled with code. Then, Agent Harrow. Her face was granite. Based on evidence provided by Miss Quinn and corroborated by Miss Vale's data, the UCD has confirmed an internal breach. My deputy has been suspended, pending a federal investigation. A roar went up from the crowd. The ghost wasn't just in the shadows. It was wearing a badge. Preston Hale, who'd been sitting with his lawyers, finally stood. His face was a mask of performative outrage. "Mr. Chairman, this is a circus. This is a coordinated attack on my character, orchestrated by the Marchese Syndicate, using a compromised federal agent and a barmaid." He signaled to his lawyer, "I present evidence of witness tampering and coercion." The screens changed. The feed was grainy, shot from a distance, through a rain-streaked window. It was Brickhouse 12. It was her. It was Dario. The entire theater watched in dead silence as Dario leaned in, as Hazel's eyes closed, as they kissed. The audio was non-existent, but the intimacy was explosive. A wave of shouts and jeers erupted. The cameras zoomed in on Hazel's face, her cheeks burning. "Miss Quinn," Hale's voice boomed. "Is that you? Were you, or were you not, in a private, intimate liaison with the very man you are here to defend?" Hazel turned, walking back to the podium. She looked at Hale. Then she looked at the camera. "Yes," she said, her voice clear. "That is me." The theater went silent again. "I was there, and I did kiss him." She took a breath, holding the gaze of every person in the room. "But my feelings are not on trial here. My affection for a man does not launder dirty money, and it does not contaminate clean money. The facts are the facts. The watermark is the watermark." She had not seen Dario arrive. He had slipped into the back row of the theater, a shadow among shadows. Before she had even taken the stand, he had quietly placed a small paper bag on the floor beneath her designated chair. She had felt it with her foot. Now, she looked down. It was a single carton of Milo's milk and a small, folded, blue ribbon. Family. First, it was the anchor she needed. "This is a farce," Hale shouted. Agent Harrow stood. "Mr. Chairman, the UCD moves to detain Commissioner Hale on the basis of, "You'll do no such thing, Agent," Hale snapped. He threw a document onto the table. "I'm acting as a provisional member of the Atlantic Corridor Task Force. As such, I have temporary federal immunity from local and UCD interference. You can't touch me." The commissioners looked at the document. It was legal. It was real. The room froze. Harrow was powerless. Hale smiled, a victor's smirk. "This hearing is paused for a 1-hour recess," and the chairman declared, his voice heavy. The room exploded into chaos. Hazel felt the floor drop out from under her. He was going to walk. She was escorted to a small, private hallway behind the stage. The adrenaline drained, leaving her shaking. The fire exit door opened, and Dario was there. He just stood in the opposite doorway, 10 feet away. They didn't move. They didn't touch. They just looked at each other. His eyes were dark, full of a controlled rage. He gave a single, slow nod, as if to say, "Don't break. Finish the climb." The door burst open again. Sienna Vale ran in, her face flushed, her professional mask cracked with excitement. She was holding a worn, manila folder. "They're here," Sienna breathed. "They came." "Who?" Hazel asked. "The real Harbor." Sienna held up the folder. This was just delivered. By hand. By who? Dario asked, stepping forward. Old Man Noah, Sienna said, her voice filled with reverence. The one everyone trusts. Sienna didn't wait. She marched back into the theater, straight to the chairman's bench, slamming the folder down. Mr. Chairman, Sienna's voice rang out, silencing the room. New evidence, not digital, physical. The chairman opened the folder. His eyebrows shot up. These, he announced to the stunned room, are handwritten, notarized affidavits from 12 independent boat captains and small freight owners. He held one up, his voice shaking with anger. They are all identical complaints of extortion. They accuse Commissioner Hale of running a mandatory security fee racket for access to the public docks. This isn't money laundering. This is racketeering. Hale's face went white. This evidence bypassed his federal immunity. This was a state crime, and the IAC had full jurisdiction. The chairman looked at the clock. The recess is over. He slammed the gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. This hearing is immediately reconvened. Lock the doors. Harbor City held its breath. It was past 10 at night. The Harbor Theater, packed to the rafters, was holding its collective breath. The air was dead, waiting. The chairman of the Interstate Integrity Commission shuffled the handwritten affidavits from Old Man Noah and his captains. He leaned toward the microphone, his mouth open, ready to announce the findings. And the theater plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. A single, collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by the immediate, rising murmur of panic, the ACN-14 broadcast lights, the stage lights, the microphones all dead. Preston Hale did not panic. He moved. In the confusion, as people fumbled for their phones, a team of 4 men in dark blue harbor maintenance jackets moved with purpose. They weren't heading for the exit. They were rushing the stage. Their objective was the evidence table, where the original physical memory card, the one Hazel had swapped in the diner, was still logged as evidence. They were here to erase the last link. But Dario Marchese had anticipated a final, desperate move. As Hale's men hit the stairs, they were intercepted. The men who had been standing impassively by the fire exits, the ones dressed as theater ushers, moved. They were Harbor Line Protective Service. The confrontation was not gunfire. It was brutal, silent, and efficient. It happened in the darkness of the orchestra pit and the tunnels beneath the raked seating. It was the sound of sharp, indrawn breaths, the thud of body blows against the theater's foundation, the scrape of boots on concrete. No knives, no guns, just professional, hand-to-hand control, chokeholds, joint locks, and the swift, decisive retrieval of a single, tiny USB drive. One of Dario's men emerged from the shadows, palming the device. He vanished back into the panicked crowd. He's trying to destroy the digital proof, too, Harrow hissed, grabbing Hazel's arm in the dark. The main projector is dead. The backup, Hazel said, her mind racing. In the AV booth, it runs on the emergency generator. While the crowd surged toward the exits, Hazel and Harrow fought their way against the tide, pushing up the aisle. Sienna Vale was already there, a silhouette against the emergency exit sign, her laptop open. "I need 30 seconds," she yelled over the rising noise. The emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim, eerie red glow over the chaos. The backup projector whirred to life. Sienna slammed her hand on the keyboard. The watermark data, the undeniable cryptographic trace of Hale's IP address originating from the Atlantic Corridor Task Force, flashed onto the main screen, stark and damning. "Mr. Chairman," Sienna's voice boomed, amplified by the theater's acoustics. "The power failure cannot erase the digital proof. The log is on the screen. The commission must accept this as valid." At the rear of the theater, Preston Hale burst through the emergency exit into the rain-slicked loading bay. His car was waiting, engine running. He threw himself into the driver's seat. He slammed the car into drive. The engine roared, and the car lurched violently, but it did not move. The sound of metal screaming against metal filled the night. Hale looked out his windshield. Standing in the rain, illuminated by the flashing red emergency light, was Old Man Noah. He was at the controls of a massive, yellow shipyard forklift. He had calmly driven it up the ramp and inserted the two 10-foot steel forks directly under the frame of Hale's sedan, lifting the front wheels 2 feet off the ground. It was an absurd, glorious, and perfectly everyday act of defiance. Hale was trapped, his wheels spinning uselessly in the air, just as the clean, uncompromised UCD tactical team, called in by Harrow, swarmed the loading bay. Back inside, the main lights flickered and buzzed back to life. The chairman, his face grim, returned to the podium. He slammed the gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. This commission finds sufficient cause. We are placing the Harbor Port Fund under immediate temporary guardianship. He looked toward the back, where Hale was being cuffed. And we are opening a full, independent investigation into the Atlantic Corridor Task Force. A single cheer started in the back row. It became a roar. Harbor City had won. The cameras focused on the stage, on Sienna, on Harrow, Dario, who had been watching from the shadows of the orchestra pit. Stepped back, letting the light wash over them. But he didn't leave. Hazel stood near the podium, her knees weak, her hand clutching the small blue ribbon from the bag. The crowd was parting. Dario walked toward her. He didn't touch her. He didn't kiss her. In front of the cameras, in front of the entire city. He walked up and placed a simple, brown paper grocery bag into her hands. He leaned in, his voice a whisper only for her. Family, then work. Hazel looked past him. Maria, Sal's wife, was by the main door. Milo was fast asleep on her shoulder, his face peaceful, unaware of the war that had just been fought for him. Hazel's heart ached with a sudden, painful clarity. Her love for Dario wasn't a fairy tale. It was not an escape. It was a choice, made in the hard, practical light of day. It was a promise to keep showing up. Agent Harrow walked over, stopping in front of Dario. For a long moment, the Fed and the boss just looked at each other. They were not friends. They would never be. They were two opposing forces that had, for one brief moment, aligned to save the city. Harrow extended her hand. Dario took it, a single, firm shake. The UCD is initiating full-time transitional protection for Miss Quinn and her son, Harrow said. It was a promise. The Docklight Diner was open. The neon sign was fixed. A few weeks later, a framed photo hung on the wall by the register. It was from the community day. Hazel was on the podium, her voice strong. Milo was at the edge, holding a milk carton, and in the background, a shadow in the crowd, was Dario, holding a grocery bag. Late one night, Hazel took the photo down on the back. She wrote in pen, "We weren't safe because we were lucky. We were safe because we chose each other in the hard times." The rain was softer now. It was a Tuesday. Hazel was cooking, the small apartment filled with the warm smell of garlic and tomatoes. A knock. She opened it. Dario. No guards, no suit. He held one bag. "I brought milk," he said, "and leeks. I read they're good in soup." He was learning. He stepped inside, and the new deadbolt clicked shut. This was not a romance of grand gestures. This was a romance of survival. He was moving his logistics, separating the port fund completely, making his operation transparent. She was remaining a civilian witness for the IIC. The red RX light on the hallway camera was gone. The only light was the warm glow from the lamp in apartment 3B. The only sounds were the bubbling of the pot, the quiet laughter of Milo playing with his knights, and two adults, finally, learning how to love without losing themselves. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below to say hello and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.